Okay, it looks like YouTube is thinking about it. Yeah, there we go. Uh,
Looks
oh, I
like
might have to
quite
redo
a
that.
looks like quite a few people too from Michelle's group.
Yeah.
Recognize quite a few names.
Yeah, it looks like the live stream's being a little bit weird. So let's see. Uh, Give me a second to fix that, and then we'll get started momentarily.
It's showing up on my, that it's on. So
Yeah. There's still a couple more people joining on Zoom as well. It's just fantastic. Excellent. It looks like YouTube is sorted out as well. Awesome, awesome. Cool. Let's let's go ahead and get started then, I think. Are you
all
ready to
right,
go, Cindy?
I am.
Great. So, hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome for this really fun presentation. Cindy just reached out to me and said that she was going to be presenting this at ClarinetFest and wanted a practice run through of it. And it's going to be a great opportunity as well to give her some feedback and get some feedback on sort of how this presentation goes and how it feels. And I think it's going to be a really fun one, sort of looking at some yoga techniques and breathing techniques and getting better air. And I'm always a big fan of better air support and more air. So without further ado, go ahead and take it away, Cindy.
All right, okay. Well, so welcome. And the way that I'd like to work this is that I'll go through the entire presentation first. And then if you've got any questions that come up as you're listening to the presentation, if you could just put the question out on the chat, and then what will happen is afterwards we'll have a Q and A. And I'm here, I'm sure Josh is as well, as long as we need. So just keep asking the questions. Josh and I were talking a little bit before you all popped in, and I told him, I said, I love questions because you can try to anticipate what other people are thinking about, and what maybe kind of clarification they need or something like that. But it's always great insight. I always learn so much more from questions than I do on my own presentation. So thank you all for coming. And what I'm going to do first here is share a PowerPoint that I have. So we'll get that up and going. All right. So the name of this is Yoga Techniques for Better Breath Control. And before we get started here, and let me see if I can, there we go. Um, just a little bit first about yoga, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I think a lot of people, when they first hear yoga, especially in the West, we think of just the posture itself. And really, yoga is a lot more than just the posture. There's actually 8 different components, and 4 of them are really, really, I think, very much in alignment with what we do as musicians. So, besides the posture, there's also concentration and focus, which is actually one of the key components to yoga. And then there's awareness of our body as well as our state of mind that plays an important part in yoga. And then there's actually a whole component on breath techniques, which is called pranayama. So just a little bit, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction into yoga because again, a lot of times I think yoga people think it's just the posture, but there's a lot more to it than that. So um, for today, let me get my next slide up here. What you're going to learn is one yoga posture, and what this is really good for is increasing your lung capacity. And then I'm going to demonstrate, and you can follow along if you want and do it with me. There's 3 different breath techniques that we're going to learn, and these will help you to improve your airflow. So first of all, 101 of anatomy, intercostal muscles. And some of you have maybe heard of intercostal muscles. What they are is intercostal, that word actually means something that is situated between the ribs. And so this little graphic here on the side, the green part is the actual intercostal muscle. And they're basically like a thin muscle that's in between each of the ribs. It doesn't go over the rib, but it's connected to each of the ribs. And so one of the things to keep in mind is that as we age, a lot of times not just other muscles in our body, but as well as the intercostal muscles, they start getting very, very tight and tense. And so if we're not doing any type of exercise or movement to continually stretch and create flexibility and maintain that flexibility, we're going to lose that. And then what will happen is when we lose that flexibility, we also lose some of the lung capacity as well. So uh, they're important again they're basically responsible, the intercostal muscles, for expanding and contracting the rib cage. So if we didn't have these, the rib cage would just literally stay where it is. So we need these muscles in order to expand and contract the rib cage. And there's 6 different directions. You probably already know that as you breathe in and breathe out, your rib cage goes up and down. But what you might not know is it also goes out to the side, so left and right, and it also front and back expands and contracts. So there's actually 6 different directions that the intercostal muscles should move when we're breathing in and then breathing out. And that's what causes the if I had, this as far as like a demonstration of the rib cage, when we're exhaling, the intercostal muscles are very close together. And then when we inhale, they should expand out, which is giving the lungs more space within our body. So lack of movement or flexibility in the intercostal muscles actually decreases our lung capacity. So, posture. Nice picture of me here. So, yoga posture to increase movement or flexibility of the intercostal muscles. And there's actually several different postures, but I like using this one because it's very, very easy to do. It's actually better to be seated than to stand up. And so, even if someone has an issue standing up, they can do this posture seated. And if you notice in the picture here, my hand that's on the chair here, I'm actually pressing down a little bit. And when I press down, I'm actually pressing so that I can get this other hip on the other side very stationary and supported on the seat. And then as you can see right from this picture here, how the rib cage is being stretched out. So I have another picture here, correct posture. And some things to point out, and again, I have a little bit of a graphic here to just show you how the rib cage is coming out. So when we do this type of stretch or movement, we're basically uh, having the movement of the rib cage coming out to the side. The other thing is I've got this arrow here because really from the base of the spine all the way up through the cervical, which is the top of your spine, you want to have a nice straight line of energy coming through. Of course, the spine is turning out as well. But if you notice, and I've got an incorrect here, you don't want to be doing this because this is really good for the hip if you want to stretch out the hip, but it's not doing anything here for the rib cage. So here's the difference between that that nice line of energy from the base of the spine all the way up through the cervical, where this one isn't. So if I was doing this, and again, yeah, you can do it. I see some people already trying to do this. So to demonstrate again, basically have your one hand pressing in so that you're pressing against this other hip. And then when you bring the arm up, think of jotting the rib cage out and trying to keep the base of your throat here in alignment with the base of the spine. So again, not this, right? It's this. And of course, you would want to do it on the other side as well. And you can, yeah, try it and just see. The other thing that you can do to kind of give yourself a measurement, if your rib cage is maybe a little tighter or those the intercostal muscles are tighter, is if you actually just put your hands on, below your breast area here and exhale completely, and then inhale, and you should actually feel quite a bit of movement. I don't know if you can see that online or not, but there should be quite a bit of movement, especially even going out this way, not just front and back and down and up, but also out to the side. So that's also a nice movement to just give yourself a check to see, can I do that or not? I see Josh doing it here. Yeah, yeah. And so, and I'm going to give you a little practice exercise later on because for some folks, they think they're doing it, but they can only come out maybe this far. And so by practicing it over and over, you'll be able to get that rib cage out more. So besides the posture, then we also have some breath techniques. First of all, why are they important? And we probably, as musicians, already know a lot of why this would be important, but it really affects your airflow and it improves the speed of the airflow going through, which we all know that you get a better tone quality when you have that nice fast airflow. It's also the breath techniques will help for better support as well as control. And it also improves the duration. So for how long you'll be able to extend that airflow through your instrument. So the first technique, and again, there's three different techniques. The first technique is pretty easy. In fact, straw breath is pretty much what we do when we play a clarinet or play any wind instrument. So these three breath techniques, the first one is pretty easy to do. The second one I'm going to show you and demonstrate today is a little bit more difficult. I would call it like an intermediate type of breath technique. And then the other one is the more advanced. So for those of you that are the type A's, you'll have maybe a little bit of a challenge to learn these. So with the breath, the straw breath, what that is long, slow breaths that are also supporting the abdominal muscles. And we use this type of breath for better control of the airflow, as well as how it improves the duration or how long we can keep that airflow going through our instrument. So I'm going to demonstrate and explain exactly how this works. And again, if you want to, try to do it as well, you can. And once I open it up for questions and answers, if you have any other questions about it, you can certainly ask. But the way you do this is, first of all, when you do the straw breath, it's really important that you exhale first. You want to get all of the air out of your lungs that's currently in there. So you'll exhale first, and then you'll take a long, slow breath in. You're going to purse your lips, or if you want, you could actually use your embouchure that we use, and then you're going to exhale very, very slowly out through the mouth. So again, it's very similar to when we actually play the clarinet. So it looks like this. We'll exhale first, and then inhale, nice, slow, long breath in. Fill the lungs, and then purse the lips and exhale slowly. And as you're exhaling, you want to see if you can support the abdominal muscles as you're doing this. And think of exhaling completely. So get all of the air out of the lungs. And sometimes the brain kind of plays a trick on you. You might think you're at the end of the exhalation, and you're really not. Just keep pressing and pushing out to see if you can extend that breath. And then as soon as you get to the very bottom of that exhalation, go and do another slow, long breath in, fill the lungs up as much as you can, and then purse the lips again and start to exhale while you're supporting the abdominal muscles. So everybody will be at a different level as far as how long they can support that long breath out. And when I first started doing this, which was years ago, I could only do about 20 seconds. So one of the things that I challenged myself is that when I was doing this breath, I would have a clock that had the second hand and see if I could over time develop more of that or that duration. And now I'm up to almost 60 seconds. So it does improve over time. And part of that too is the exercise that we're doing to expand the lungs and the rib cage. So that's straw breath. The next one, and don't worry about how you pronounce this, it's actually pronounced Kapal Abati, but don't worry about that. There's not going to be a test afterwards. Most people call it breath of fire. It does actually warm up the body if you did it quite quite a bit, but it would take quite a bit for you to probably warm up the body. So first of all, what is it? It's short, quick, vigorous exhalations with what we call an effortless inhale. And I'm going to demonstrate this in a bit. If you cannot do this right now, do not be discouraged. This is a more intermediate type of breath technique. And basically what this does is it's going to improve the strength of your abdominal muscles, which in turn will help with breath support as well as breath control. It also will help you to improve the speed of your airflow. So again, I'm going to demonstrate what this is. And again, if you want to, follow along, if you want to try it, and then if you've got questions, again, at the end, I can take questions, but I'm going to back up a little bit because you kind of need to see what I'm doing here with my abdominal area. So I'm going to turn to the side so maybe you can see it a little bit better. And you'll inhale, and then these quick, short, vigorous exhalations are going to happen. So this is how it looks and sounds. Notice how I'm pulling the stomach and the abdominal muscles in when I exhale. And then again, it's an effortless inhale. So it takes a little bit of a knack to get it. And again, if you can't do it right now, don't be discouraged. It actually over time you'll be able to do it. It just takes a little bit of practice, like anything, right? And then there's the Tumo breath. So Tumo breathing, and there's actually quite a few different Tumo breath techniques that are out there. This one is unique. And that what we do is we take a long exhalation while moving the abdominal in and out. Basically, in a nutshell, it's taking the straw breath and the Kapalabhati breath and combining the two of them together. So again, this is a more advanced type of breath technique, and I'll demonstrate how to do this. Again, what it does is going to improve the strength of the abdominal muscles for better breath support and control. It also improves the duration of the airflow because again, you're using kind of that straw breath that we first looked at. So again, I'll demonstrate how this is. The difference between this and the Kapalabhati breath is that this is one long exhalation while I'm bringing the abdominal in and out. So again, this is what it looks like. You'll exhale first and then inhale. Nice, slow, long breath in. And then I'm going to exhale. As you can see, as I'm exhaling, I'm bringing the belly in and back out. And this is one long exhalation as I do this. So that's the three breath techniques. Now, what I'm going to give you is some recommended practice. Practice makes perfect. So, first month, just one time every day for 30 days, do the seated side bend and see if you can hold it for 30 seconds on each side. You just do it one time. If you want to do more, you certainly can. But I would recommend doing it at least when you start out if you've not done much for movements and yoga. I have had people actually say, wow, my rib cage after a couple of days actually hurt a little bit, because you're stretching muscles, you're using muscles that maybe you haven't stretched that intensely for a while. And then do straw breath, do 5 rounds, do it every day for 30 days. So don't even worry about the other breath techniques. Just start with this and see what happens over the 30 days. And I would really recommend with that straw breath, see if, take that measurement to see, well, how many seconds can I do my rounds of straw breath? And then after 30 days, I bet you're going to see a huge improvement with how much or that duration of airflow that you can get. After the first month, hopefully you'll still be with me. Second month, the seated side bend, you're going to add 15 seconds to that. So now you're holding each side for 45 seconds. And then the breath of fire, you're going to do for 1 minute when you start out. And once you kind of get the knack of it, and it does take some effort to do. So 1 minute might not seem like a lot, but once you start doing this, 1 minute actually, you'll be like, wow, that was like a workout. So start with 1 minute. If you can't do 1 minute, do 30 seconds and do it 2 times. And then see if within that 1 month time period, if you can work up to 2 minutes and do that every day for 30 days. And then the last month, the third month and beyond, again, the seated side bend, again, only 45 seconds on each side. Only need to do it one time. Don't need to do it any more than that. Just make sure you do both sides, of course. And then the Tumo breath, you can start working on that. And again, start with maybe 1 minute. If it seems like it's a lot for you, cut it down to 15 seconds or 30 seconds and if you do 15 seconds, do four rounds of it. And then see if you can work yourself up to 2 minutes every day. And then that would be what you would want to do from then on. One of the questions that I did a preview of this last week. And one of the questions that came up was, can you do this breath work while you're playing the clarinet? And I was like, oh, wow, never thought of that, So I did actually do it with the straw breath. It works really, really well. And then also with the Tumo breath, I found that it worked really well. I actually would not recommend that you do it at all on the Kapalabhati breath, only because it's just not very conducive to the clarinet, and you're probably just going to get a lot of squeaks and squawks and all kinds of crazy stuff coming out of your clarinet. So I wouldn't advise that. But the other thing that I would recommend too is don't do it so much with the clarinet. If you want to, you certainly can, but there are a lot of very subtle idiosyncrasies with this breath that you'll start to learn. It's almost like an innate wisdom that comes from doing this over an extended period of time. And the technique works differently without your instrument than it does with. So if you want to try it, that's fine, but I would really recommend staying with doing it without the instrument so that you get the full benefit of the techniques. So that's the presentation, and we'll open it up now for questions.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I made it so everybody you can't unmute yourselves. So if you have a question, either like raise your hand or wave around a little bit, or you can do the raise hand feature in Zoom, or you can put it in the chat as well and just type your questions and thoughts there. Um, I had one question. I had a couple questions, but maybe first a suggestion. When it's the Breath of Fire one, especially, I felt like if I really did that for a minute, I would like pass out. So that might be a good warning. I think is like we should probably do that like sitting down and stop if we're getting
Yeah, yeah,
lightheaded, right?
yeah, all of these sit while you're doing them. And yeah, if you get like lightheaded, because even the straw breath can get people a little bit lightheaded because your body, if that's happening, your body's just telling you, whoa, what's going on? Oh, this is something new. So it's just kind of giving you a little warning. And so you can either back off or again, don't start with, say, a minute. Instead, start a little bit, like maybe 15 seconds, take a few calming breaths and then go back and do another like 15 seconds. Yeah, that's a good point, Josh.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always like to go too hard with everything too, so that makes sense.
Type
Um,
A.
yeah, exactly. I also was curious. I think all three of the breathing techniques really are kind of about the relationship of the abdominal muscles to sort of what the lungs are doing and the breathing. I'm curious if you could elaborate on like what role do the abdominal muscles actually play in breathing and especially air support on the clarinet?
Yeah, so you all at one point in time was a very beginner, right? And you knew nothing about how to control your body, whether it was your embouchure, the air support, or the abdominal muscles. And you probably at some point your teacher started teaching you how to support the abdominal muscles and all of that. So the diaphragm, which most people have heard about and how that works, it does play a role in the playing the clarinet and support and the breath control. But I will tell you too that you cannot breathe without using your abdominal or your diaphragm. I mean, it's impossible. So, so that's one thing. There are, and Josh, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in my trainings, I have actually heard very professional, teachers say that there's actually two different ways to use the abdominal muscles. One is to I like to think of it as pressure inside the abdominal area actually pushing out. And then the other one is just the opposite, bringing it in. And if you haven't tried this before, just try both ways and see, because I think it kind of depends on the person. And I don't think that there's necessarily a right and a wrong way to do this. It's what works best for you. For me, I've found that pushing against the inside of that abdominal area works better for me. And the way that I usually describe it is, if I or somebody was going to come up and, punch you in the stomach, what would you do? Right? And most people don't bring their belly in. They actually push out a little bit and hold it there. And so that's the technique that I use. And again, Josh, you might have some other way to explain it.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I think that that makes really good sense. I think like I've kind of run into that too, where there's kind of both people. Some people say push out, some people say pull in. Um, and actually, I think they're both doing the same thing at the end of the day. And I think what it is engaging the abdomen muscles. And I think like sort of what you were talking about, the abdomen muscles are there and kind of help to create space for the diaphragm and help the diaphragm open up. And I think that's it's the way I feel is that's what the abdomen needs to do is allow the diaphragm to open up. And I think maybe even another way of thinking of it instead of pushing out or pulling in is what if we think about our abdomen muscles kind of pulling down and engaging down
Mm.
that way so that that kind of helps with the diaphragm engaging down too. And again, I think it's kind of the same because when you do like brace your abs, like if you're going to get punched in the stomach, like my stomach does actually go in, like the surface level of my belly goes in a little bit, but I think the actual muscles are pushing out. So I think it's just a perception thing. And I think it's just engaging it to hold the diaphragm down, basically, is the idea either way. Yeah. Cool. Jody asked, how did you become introduced to yoga? And how did you connect the dots between yoga and clarinet? That's fun.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started playing clarinet when I was 8 years old. I did not start yoga at 8. So, right. I actually didn't start yoga until about 2005 or so, and it was actually through an accident. I had been a bodybuilder before that. I had been a cyclist before that, but I'd never done any yoga. And I was in a pretty severe bicycling accident. And when I went through my physical therapy, it was actually my physical therapist that recommended I do some yoga. And so that's how I actually got introduced to yoga. And throughout the learning of yoga, I started realizing, wait a second, there's a lot of things in here that could really help with clarinet playing, so that's kind of how I connected the dots, and especially that breath work. Wow, when I started doing breath work in my yoga practice, I was like, I could not believe over time, everything takes time. So it wasn't an overnight thing, but within like a year, 2 years, I couldn't believe how much better I could support and control my breath and how much more of a speed I was getting. So it changed my tone for the better. So it really is kind of interesting how the two connected.
Yeah, that's so cool. I did like what you were saying too at the end about you can do it on the clarinet, but there's also a lot of value to do it without the clarinet. And something that I was kind of latching on with that too is that when we introduce the clarinet, there's like all of our normal habits of playing the clarinet that we're thinking about, and also we're hearing clarinet sound, which is extra stimulus, and we're thinking about making an embouchure and all that stuff that just is taking up bandwidth. Whereas I think if you're really just doing the breathing on its own, you have a lot more bandwidth to have a lot more awareness of really what's going on, which I think once you get that awareness away from the clarinet, then you can really start to bring it to the clarinet for some even more
Exactly,
benefits.
exactly. Yeah, and the stroke breath really is fairly similar to doing long tones, but let's face it, if you're doing long tones correctly on your clarinet, yeah, you're probably thinking a little bit about the breath and the breath support, but it's more about how do I sound? Can I get that nice steady sound? You know, intonation. There's all these other things, like you said. So there's so many more variables that if you strip all of that away and you just focus right on the breath and what's happening inside your body and how how and what is going on. I think it does really help to improve the technique when you do put the clarinet in in the picture.
Yeah, awesome. Anne asks that Michelle teaches a technique called huffing, which sounds kind of like the breath of fire. Do you know, is it the same? Are you familiar with Michelle's huffing exercise?
I don't know that.
Cool. So I'll explain that, and then you can kind of connect the dots to the breath of fire. So the huffing exercise, the way Michelle uses it a lot is the end goal of it is to kind of find the fine line between having enough air support, but especially as you're trying to get softer and play softer dynamics. So you're having enough support, but also playing soft at the same time. And often what she'll do is you sort of huff the air as you do a diminuendo. And the idea there is when you huff, which is kind of going like in the breath of fire, where you do a little kind of thing, that huffing sort of gives a little bit more energy to the air. So then you can continue to really find that fine line between actually supporting the soft notes with good air support, but not so much air support that it actually starts to get too loud. So that's huffing. Do you want to talk about that in regards to the breath of fire?
Yeah, that's really interesting that she uses that technique. I don't know if she does yoga or not, but I would say that it has some of the same qualities as far as the air going through, that sort of thing. I think where it's different is that there's still that real focus of what's going on with the abdominal because you're really pushing in like very vigorously, as forcefully as you can, just push in and then out and then push in and release, push in, and so I don't know if she's explaining that as part of it. And this is why if you do it really, really like super forceful of pulling back and then letting go, pulling back, I don't think you would want to do it with your clarinet because it would just squeak and it would just be terrible sounding. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my feeling too, is that the Breath of Fire is a much more forceful version of it, whereas Michelle does talk about engaging the abs when you do the
Mm.
huffing, and I think that is part of the idea, is that little extra abdominal engagement gives you a little bit extra support to keep that control as you play softer. But if you did like a true Breath of Fire or really had that like then you definitely wouldn't be playing soft anymore. It would get kind of out of control. So maybe huffing instead of breath of fire, we can call it like breath of candle or like something, a little version.
Yeah, a little version of
Yeah,
it.
exactly. That's awesome. I also, as I was doing the breath of fire, I think there's actually some really great benefit there to quick inhalations as well. Even though like the big exciting part of it is the big strong exhale, but that relaxed inhale, I think as we all experiment with that and try it, you'll find that the air actually comes in really, really quickly if you just relax and let it come in and let the abdomen expand and all that good stuff. So I think that's another kind of great benefit from doing that
Yeah,
one
I
as
didn't even
well.
think of that, but it is true, because yeah. And when you start doing the breath of fire, if you're not used to doing that, what I would really recommend is start slow. You don't have to go real fast. Just, you can go pretty slow. Now, in a yoga class, and there are yoga classes where for a half an hour, 45 minutes, all you're doing is breath work. That's it. You're not doing any postures. You're sitting, you're lying down, whatever. But and then they'll go really fast with the breath of fire, you know, and they'll go for like 5 minutes. It's crazy.
That is crazy. That's awesome. David asked if there will be a recording. Yes, David, there will be. It will be on the Quick Start Clarinet YouTube channel, probably pretty much immediately after this. It should be up there once it takes a second to process. So that'll be great. Um, Tish really liked having the 3 months of exercises. Yeah, I think that's great to really make it actionable. I'm always a fan of that. Cindy R asked regarding the side bend, can you clarify the difference between the one we do in yoga and the technique you're describing, or are they the same? Can we do it while standing, or is it better to do it while sitting?
Yeah. So first of all, by doing it this way, I'm not saying that it's incorrect, but what I'm saying is, and there are some yoga postures where you definitely come off to the side like this. What I am saying is for our practice of getting the intercostal muscles to really expand and contract and really work on improving the flexibility and the range of motion within that intercostal muscle. That's where you want to really bring that rib cage out as much as possible. So I'm not saying that you go to a yoga class and your yoga teacher is like, doing this sort of thing, that it's wrong. That's incorrect because actually when you do it this way, like I said, if you're pushing down on this this hip when you're coming out, what you're doing is you're actually really helping in the lower back and the hip area. So that might be what the focus is for that day. For us, the focus is increasing that range of motion within the intercostal muscle. So again, not necessarily wrong or right. They're both correct. One thing that I would recommend, and I think any yoga teacher will say this, is what you don't want to do is this sort of thing. You see how my shoulders coming, and I'm not what we call stacking the shoulders. So if you were, say, against a wall and you were doing it, you would be stacking one shoulder on top of the other. So, you're not bringing this forward or back or anything like that. You're staying. So that part is a correction as far as you don't want to injure yourself. You want to keep those shoulders stacked. And I think any certified yoga instructor is going to give you that as a prompt. As far as standing versus sitting, for again, the intercostal muscles, I find it actually is better to sit. And the reason why is because you can really ground what we call ground in that opposite hip so that you can really get that nice expansion going out. Whereas if you're standing, yeah, from probably the foot all the way up, you're going to get a nice extension, but I don't think it grounds as much in that hip so that you're really, again, really focusing on the rib cage as well.
Yeah, awesome. Cindy R also asked regarding the straw breathing. They were taught in a class at some point to actually use a straw, and I've encountered that too. And actually, I've done that with students before to actually do like a little coffee stir straw to get the good air going. Do you recommend using a straw?
Yeah, yeah, you absolutely could. And again, I think using the straw, just be careful that you're not focusing more on what's going on here versus what's going on with the lungs and that sort of thing. The straw breath, really the focus and the benefit of that is seeing how big of, and I would say the maximum amount of lung capacity you can do, how well you can have a nice full breath in. And it's interesting because straw breath, when I first started learning about this, which was years and years ago, I had a yoga instructor at the time that was doing what he called straw breath, and he didn't mention a straw or anything. It's when I started looking at videos for like clarinet and musicians where they were calling it straw breath and they were actually using a straw. And I'm like, well, that's really interesting. And I'm wondering too if someone way back when, maybe had a yoga instructor that called it, say, straw breath, and then they started using a straw.
Yeah, I like the straw for like teaching clarinet air support because it gives like a really clear, tangible, like you can hear the kind of whistliness of that narrow airflow through the straw. You can feel like if you're blowing it on your hand, you can feel what it feels like through the straw and then mimic it without as well. So it is great for kind of shaping the flow of the air on the clarinet and how we want the clarinet to go. But I can definitely see how, and I actually might change how I teach it when I use the straw in lessons too, a little bit to be more aware of the actual whole rest of the breathing and not just exactly what's happening at that point for sure. Um, I had a question about the straw breath as well. You mentioned that kind of a goal is to be able to hold it longer and longer. And I'm curious how kind of the rate of the flow of the air ties into that, because definitely for clarinet playing, we want a fast enough stream of air to like actually vibrate the reed. But I could see I would get much, much more length to it by blowing a really, really slow, gentle stream of air. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so the technique from a yoga standpoint is to do this as slow and as long of an exhalation as you possibly can. The teacher that taught this to me literally said, if you have a feather in front, it should not move. Right? So that airflow is just, it's such a slow, slow airflow. Not necessarily the speed. The speed could actually still be kind of fast. But if you were using your clarinet, it would be like a pianissimo, right? Pianissimo um, type, it wouldn't be like fortissimo. You want to, because what that's going to do, again, what we're working on, the whole focus of that is to really get that maximum amount of air in the lungs, and then the duration, right? The duration of that whole breath or exhalation.
Yeah, perfect. That actually ties perfectly into Barbara's question about with the straw breath, how do you maximize the inhale? And I also had a question about that too. I think you were breathing in through your nose every time. Should you breathe in through your nose or the mouth? And yeah, how do you
That's
maximize
what I
that?
would recommend. Again, for the yoga technique, the very, very first thing, always exhale first. Always exhale so that you get all of the stale air out of your lungs first. And then that way too, you can take that nice full long breath in. And I, again, the yoga technique is through the nose. So you're really big breath in, right? And then go as slow as you can. I
Yeah.
would be very curious to know. Like I said, when I first started, it was like 20 seconds. And part of that too is the not necessarily, well, it is partly speed, but the other thing is being able to control it, right? To control that. And think about when you play the clarinet and you do have to play something really pianissimo, how it takes actually more support, right? When you play pianissimo than it does when you play forte. And so I think that straw breath is really good for like pianissimo playing and playing softly, but still having that nice sound.
I also think as you have the time to like really pay attention to what's actually going with there and what's actually happening, you can also maybe think about the steadiness of it too. And over time you'll develop more steadiness. And I think steadiness is one of the maybe more underrated components to playing the clarinet, especially when it comes to the air support, because it is really, if you can keep the air steady at the start of the note, and through the transition to the next note, that's where you're gonna have really smooth connections and things will come out easily. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
exercise could be great.
Yeah, think about too when you perform live and you probably have a little bit of nervousness going on, right? Little stage anxiety going on. We're all a little bit different as far as that. But again, that steadiness of breath, especially if you have to start maybe playing and it's something that's, you start out really soft and then you have to maybe crescendo or something like that. Yeah, the steadiness is really an important part of that. And when you're nervous, a lot of times it's not real steady, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Terry asked if you have any kind of general tips on posture for playing the clarinet, or any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I like to always tell my students to stack their shoulders over their hips. So, in other words, not this, right? Here, I'll bring my camera down a little bit. But we have a tendency to sit like this, or even if our back is a little straighter, our shoulders are coming in. And so I don't know if you can see this or not, but my shoulder is not over my hip. And so we want to roll the shoulders back. And when we do that, it actually changes the shape of our spine so that now you can see that my shoulders are directly over the hips. And one of the things that I do for students a lot of times too is I'll have them stand against a wall and, really get the head, the shoulders, lower back on the wall, right? And have them close their eyes and just feel what that feels like. So, because so many of us were bringing our shoulders in, right? And so if we stand against a wall, we can really feel what that feels like. And so then once they're there and they have more awareness of where their shoulders really need to be, then I have them open their eyes and walk a little bit away from the wall, but keep that same openness of the shoulders. And most of my students are like, wow, I do not walk like this. I do not sit like this. Even when we're driving our cars, and doing all of those daily activities that we do, there's so many times when the shoulders are coming in. One of the exercises that I really recommend is just doing shoulder rolls like this, right? Not going forward because we're always going forward, but counteracting that and just really getting that nice full range of motion. The other thing that I like to show people, and you can try this too, bring your shoulder weight in and then try to lift your elbow up. It only goes so far. Like literally will not go any farther. So that's a good sign that it's like, oh my gosh, my shoulders are coming in. As soon as you bring that shoulder back, boom, comes right up. So so that's a little technique to use. The other thing is that I'll bring my camera up a little bit. But when you should be able to bring the the arm fairly close to the ear and have the the elbow pointing straight up. If it doesn't do that and it's kind of maybe out to here, that also is a sign that there's something going on with the shoulder that's probably a little bit inward rotation instead of that external rotation of the shoulder.
Yeah, I was definitely noticing that when we were doing the first yoga pose that like my arm like goes to the and then it's like hard to get it
Yeah, you
all the
should
way
be
up.
able to
Yeah.
feel this with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to like that shoulder stuff is yeah, really great. And I think one of the big benefits of that when it comes to playing the clarinet is what you were talking about with the intercostal muscles and the directions of the ribs and stuff. And you mentioned the six directions of up, down, front, back, and left and right. And I actually really think it's even like 360 directions of all of those. So we have not just purely front and back, but
Oh
also
yeah,
like
it's
10
definitely a
degrees around
barrel.
and
It's a
yeah.
it's a barrel type movement.
Yeah, and when you give that like more openness to the shoulders and aren't hunched over, then it gives so much more room for more air in there, which is really great. Yeah. Awesome. I think that's all of the questions. Does anybody else have any questions? Last chance to type a question in the chat on Zoom. Um, we have some people watching on YouTube, which is awesome. I don't see any questions on YouTube. So yeah, we'll give it maybe a moment for anybody who's typing any last questions. But thanks so much for doing this. And yeah, it was really interesting and some really good stuff to think about. And I'm excited to try the breathing exercises over the next few months.
Yeah, and if any of you are teachers, I think these are really good. And the straw breath, especially for younger uh, clarinetists that maybe are just learning and maybe they're 8, 9, 10 years old, that sort of thing. I think the straw breath would be really good. I don't know about the other two. It might be a little bit too much for the younger generation, but yeah, if you play in any of the different organizations or you're a teacher or anything like that, I think it can really be helpful, not just for us as musicians, but also in teaching others. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being able to preview this because it's really good experience for me too. Because I'll be a little nervous the day out.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's awesome. But you'll have your good steady straw breath, so you won't
yes,
be too
that's
shaky.
right.
That's great. I also loved your presentation design with the green Dublin colors will be
Oh
perfect
yeah.
for Clarinet Fest too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, great. Cool. Well, it looks like just a lot of appreciation in the chat, which is fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much. It's going to be a great presentation at Clarinet Fest. Hopefully, some of us will get to see you live there as well. But thanks so much to everybody for joining as well and being here for Cindy to practice with. And yeah, I learned a lot, so I'm looking forward to
All
implementing it.
right, thanks. Yeah.